So are you considering becoming a doctor in 2025? Maybe you've always dreamed of becoming a doctor, but now you're like, AI is here and I don't know what I'm going to do in the future. Well, I'm here to help you answer that question. So welcome back to the channel. For those joining me for the first time, I'm Matt and I'm a doctor here working in Cape Town, South Africa. I've spent most of my medical career mainly doing emergency medicine as well as general practice. I also did a bit of time working on cruise ships around the world. So today's video is mainly for those of you who have just finished your school career and maybe you're thinking of getting into medicine as a career and wondering if it's the right decision for you. I'm going to cover some of the most common pros and cons of becoming a doctor, and also just to give you some recommendations and help. I'm going to give you my honest opinion after being a doctor now for about 10 years, and hopefully this helps you make that decision. So obviously, I'm currently working as a doctor. I must think it's worthwhile. But the real question is, if I was to study medicine today, would I still want to do it knowing what I know now? So let's ask some of the biggest questions first. I'm not going to go into all the details about being a doctor, just the main points as to what I think is relevant and most important for your daily life as a doctor. There's lots of details that I can go into, but I think we'll save that for some other videos. So, question 1, is the money worth it, and is it financially stable to be a doctor in 2025? So firstly, you're probably always going to have a job. It's a fact that doctors will probably always be needed, and I doubt they'll become obsolete anytime soon, and you're always going to make a decent living. Your income is going to vary quite drastically, A, depending on how many hours you're working, B, depending on what specialization you go into, and C, what country you're actually from. As you know, rates in, for instance, US can vary greatly. You can have quite a good income in the US. Some other countries you might have a much lower income, like the UK or South Africa. The honest truth though is you're not going to make a ton of money. You're going to make enough money, and as I said, you're always going to be needed. But unless you're super specialized and you are working tons of extra overtime hours, you're not going to be rolling in cash. Those amounts of money tend to be more in big tech companies and things like that. So if you're trying to get into medicine for money, I would think of other options. So point number 2 of being a doctor in 2025, how has it changed in the last few years? There have been many advances in technology, including AI, becoming more and more relevant these days. And medicine has changed quite drastically over the last few years. There's a lot more information available to patients these days, and there's quite a lot of mistrust in doctors from a patient perspective when they can read many things online now. For instance, you can often have a patient coming in who actually just walk in the door and have a medication request without actually asking you for a diagnosis. They give you the diagnosis themselves and then come up with a medication request because you're the one who's able to write the script. With AI becoming more prevalent these days, it's also a question as to how much will that take away from our jobs. But you also have to consider that it also makes your job much easier. For instance, there are AI technologies and apps that make note-keeping much easier, keeping track of your data, etc. But on the other hand, for instance, if you're going into radiology, AI now can identify lots of pathology and disease just as well as a human. The human has to ultimately make the final decision, but the technology is there already. So while I think AI will impact some specializations, I think it is still a long way off from taking away from people's jobs. I think that mainly what AI will do for most specializations or general practitioners is actually be an adjunct to your current position and add to your daily practice, hopefully making things easier as time goes on. So aspect number 3, the altruistic factor. I mean, most people hopefully wouldn't get into medicine without having the need of wanting to help other people. And I think this is still probably and hopefully the main draw for many people getting into medicine these days. I do feel though that many doctors, having been in the profession for many years, and as they gain more experience, I do feel that this feeling of wanting to help others does change over time. And I feel like many doctors, having been in the profession for a few years, ultimately suffer from a lot of burnout, from lots of overtime hours, working hard, and you kind of always just feel like you're never finishing with all the patients that you have. There's always another patient. It seems like a endless struggle to fix things. And I think especially in some of these more rural settings, when you have massive numbers of patients that you're seeing every day, it can often feel like you're not making a huge difference. I think that this is more about your mindset, and I think you have to go into it realizing that you are making a difference to each individual person that you see. And although new problems come up every day, new patients come to you every single day, and it's kind of like you never finish a job, you still are making a difference at the end of the day. I think it's quite easy to forget this, especially when you're tired, a bit burnt out, working overtime hours, not getting enough sleep that you need or the breaks that you need during the day. And it can be difficult to see the positive side sometimes. But as I said, at the end of the day, you are making a difference. Even if it's a minor difference to one person in a day, the improvement is there. So aspect number 4 is the work-life balance and your training commitment. I mean, you have to realize there's many years of study that go into medicine. Your path can be anywhere from 9 to 14 years, depending on if you want to specialize. You know, at least in South Africa, we do 6 years of study, we do 2 years of internship, 1 year of community service before you can even practice as a GP. And after that, if you're lucky to get into your chosen speciality immediately, you're still going to have to be working for at least another 4 to 5 years. Some people actually wait 2 to 4 years before even getting into the program. So obviously this is quite a huge time commitment in terms of your training. The other thing to realize is most jobs, especially while you're training in the early years of medicine, often involve overtime hours. So you're going to be doing night shifts, many weekends. I know when I did my full year of community service, you lose half your weekends for the year. Although you do get this back in weekdays, that's still a big loss in terms of family and friend time. You know, you have to take that into consideration, that there's going to be many events, social events, which you will just not be able to attend because you will be doing your training. Factor number 5 would be the social aspect, or sort of professional status and recognition rather. You know, definitely when you tell someone, oh, I'm a doctor, people generally aren't like, oh, okay, that's chilled, and then they move on to the next question. There is a certain amount of awe and respect, you know, given to the person when you realize somebody else is a doctor. So, you know, with that comes the benefit of the status and respect with the profession. There's also plenty of networking opportunities, whether if this is during your training or if it is with your patients that you see daily, or some of the travel aspects where you might go to conferences or other areas of the world to further your training. So there can be quite a lot of networking involved. Although bear in mind that your degree isn't necessarily transferable from one country to another. There's easier countries to get into, but many places do require exams to transfer your training across. Factor number 6 would be the stress factor, life and death decisions. Medicine definitely has a unique kind of pressure compared to other professions. Unlike most jobs where you make a mistake, you might be reprimanded for, you know, upsetting a customer or perhaps losing some money for the company. Your mistake seldom results in a death of somebody or perhaps risk of injury to a person. You know, the average person doesn't have to worry that their decision may affect somebody else's life. And this constant sort of unique stress that comes with the job definitely does weigh on doctors on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there's also the good side. I mean, you make a big difference. You're often saving people's lives or making their lives much better. But it's quite a seesaw and a bit of a balancing act. You're always worried about the worst situation, but obviously trying to give somebody the best situation possible. So my final thoughts on this matter. Is it worth it? Well, honestly, the answer is that it depends. But I think the main reason that you need to think about is your job satisfaction and enjoyment at the end of the day. If you're not enjoying your job on a daily basis and you're not getting job satisfaction, it's going to lead to burnout, eventually depression, and eventually you'll hate your job. If you're getting into medicine for the wrong reasons, it can steadily go downhill from there. I think that medicine is a very safe job, and I don't think the position will ever become obsolete, at least in a very, very long time. You will always have a job, but the problem is you might not necessarily have the job where you want it to be. For instance, if you to get a specialty position, at least in my setting in Cape Town, South Africa, it's quite competitive. So although you'll always have a job, you might not necessarily get it in the city that you want. You might have to move somewhere else to specialize, or move somewhere else just to get the job that you want. There's a lot less competition in some other professions. In terms of money, don't go into medicine for money, just don't do it. I don't think it's the easiest way to make money. As I mentioned earlier, there are much easier ways to make money rather than getting into medicine. You will always have a job and you will always have a decent living, but you're not going to be driving around in a Ferrari. If you're going into medicine, it must be your passion, and it takes a lengthy amount of time and commitment to complete your training. So if it isn't your passion, it's definitely going to weigh up on you and cause a lot of job dissatisfaction and burnout over time. As I said, I think ultimately it comes down to, do you enjoy what you do on a daily basis, regardless of money, where you live? I think the easiest way to answer the question is, if you were to win the lotto tomorrow and you had tons of money to live off of, would you still want to do medicine? And that's your answer. So please let me know if this video helped you. Please comment below with your questions with pursuing medicine, and please share this video with anyone you know who is trying to get into a medical career. Thank you.